Hello everyone, and welcome to our third reflection on the priestly blessing, or the Aaronic blessing as it's known. Let me just read the appropriate verses. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. We've already looked at the first of these verses, the Lord bless you and keep you. We're now moving on to the next one. But before I do that, can I just say there's an interesting thing that you notice when you look at it in the Hebrew. The three verses, in the first one it has 3 words, in the second one it has 5, and then in the third one it has 7. Now you won't notice that in your English translations, because quite often you need 2 or 3 English words to translate one of the Hebrew words, and that's because Hebrew has prefixes and suffixes, so what looks like one word needs several English words to translate it. But that's an interesting, I think 3, 5, 7 is a pattern. It's almost like this is a blessing, and it begins, and as it develops, it expands. It's the overflow of blessing of God to his people. So we're looking at this second verse today. The Lord make his face shine upon you, or literally, Yahweh shine his face upon you. Yahweh, the covenant name for God, as we've seen or noted in a previous talk. Now, the Hebrew word for shine is or, and that's found in the beginning of the Bible in Genesis 1, verse 3. Because as God begins to create, at the beginning there's darkness and chaos, and everything seems to be a formless, chaotic void. And God speaks into the darkness and says, let there be or, let there be light. And that's interesting, because when we think of shining here, or God shining his face into our lives, we remember that God is the creator God, who did that at the beginning of creation. And he's also the Redeemer God, who wants to continue to shine his light of grace and goodness and love into the darkness and the chaos of our lives. Because sometimes that's exactly how our lives are. And we feel lost, we feel disrupted and disorganized and needing truth and exploring and wrestling with so many things. And we just need to be still and allow God to deal with these issues. So that's the first point. The second point relates to the word face. Now in Hebrew, the root word is pana, and that just means to turn, strangely enough, to turn. But there are many derivatives from that, and one is panaim, where we get face, and that's in the plural. Now again, that's interesting, but when you think about it, our faces can display and express a variety of moods and feelings and emotions. So it's complex. So maybe the plural is necessary. And here, when we're referring to God, we're talking about the wholeness of his being. Not just one side of God, but the wholeness of his being. Now, I was reading David Attenborough the other day. That's the book Life on Earth, the new one, the 40-year anniversary edition. And he was talking about how human beings have got far more facial muscles than any other species, which means we have a far broader and greater range of expressions, facial expressions, than any other species. And whereas some social creatures like wolves or hyenas, they depend a lot on smell in their relationships. Our sense of smell in humans is very poor, but we're visual creatures. And it's the face that we look to. Because when we look at someone's face, sometimes their face betrays that what they're saying isn't actually true. The face gives it away. And isn't that wonderful that there's a variety of expressions in the human face? And when we think about God's face, well, my goodness, if we're talking about the creator of the universe, there's so much for us to know and to understand. Now, the difficulty here If we think about human beings having facial expression, that helps us understand how things can go wrong through, say, text messages or emails, where you read into the words a tone that is maybe not there, and that's why misunderstandings can often happen. And the danger with online technology is we could lose the whole art and science of reading someone's face or their body language and learning from that. But that raises a question for us. How can we do that with God, since we can't actually visually see his face? It's a metaphor, of course, but then for Christians, Jesus revealed God in human form, and to see him is to see something of God. Now, the Israelites were not in that privileged position. They lived before the coming of Jesus. But nonetheless, let me give you a three-legged stool for our journey into learning about God. Firstly, there's the biblical tradition. We've got so much to learn about the many facets of what God is like and who he is. Because the who question is so important. Not just believing in any old God, it's a particular type of God. So there's biblical tradition that we need to learn from. Then there's the testimony down throughout the ages of so many people who have written, who have reflected on this, and the church is well endowed with tremendous testimonies. And then thirdly, there's our own personal experience. So when you put the three together, we begin to build up a picture of what God is like. Therefore, think of, in these dramas with the police investigating a crime, you maybe see them building up an identikit of the suspect, and they try to build up a picture of the face. That's what we're doing with God. We can't see his face directly, but we build up the identikit from all the different experiences and from the tradition that we're a part of. God is the God of the journey, and you and I, we're on journeys. It's a learning process. May God continue to shine upon us so we may better understand who he is. Once again, thank you for listening. God be with you, and I'll see you tomorrow.